Two of the major contributions to the study of psychokinesis or telekinesis come from the Philip experiments and the experiments done by the SORRAT group. The goal of the Philip experiments was to create a fictional story about a person called Philip who died, and then interact with Philip as if he was a real spirit. The success in achieving this goal demonstrated that human minds have the capacity to create a force that, for all intents and purposes, acts like an intelligent being complete with all the personality traits that he was given, and the ability to communicate to people with knocks or raps. There was an additional goal that they had but never achieved, and that was for Philip to appear as an apparition. Obviously, the Philip experiments were different than your standard seance, where a group of people wishes to communicate with the spirit of a deceased human. The SORRAT experiments were more like your standard seance in that the participants wished to interact with whatever invisible force or forces that had the ability to move objects and rap against objects. I say it's like a standard seance, but with the important distinction is that it took place under rigorous scientific scrutiny. The goal of the SORRAT experiments was to achieve the ability to move objects just with the conscious intent of humans. This goal was not achieved even though they achieved in creating substantial paranormal phenomena that was not directly under their control. Many people would think that it might be dangerous to be creating paranormal phenomena that you are not in control of. After all, it is commonly stated that you shouldn't mess with forces that you do not understand. This train of thought is counterproductive to the advancement of science and humanity, because if we never study the things that we do not understand, we will never understand them. As I've talked about before, there is evidence that the paranormal is linked to quantum mechanics. People have been conditioned by society to think certain ways, which is why the paranormal is typically viewed as being in the realm of religion and personal belief, instead of being simply another aspect of our world that we don't quite understand because we haven't done enough scientific research in that area yet. There was no significant danger that occurred during the SORRAT experiments, though, regardless of the fact that they used Ouija boards for communication. People did get accidentally hurt sometimes, but accidental bruises are substantially different than the malevolent harm and demonic possessions that we are always warned about. Irrational fear about paranormal forces is certainly not called for then. The next thing that I want to talk about is the start of the paranormal activity for each of these experiments. I'll start with the Philip case first. The context is that the original sessions involved meditating about Philip. The new sessions involved them making conversation and singing songs. It seemed to be the case that it was when the members had both rapport and sufficient relaxation, that's when the phenomena started. They felt a vibration like a knock or rap within the table itself, though with the amount of noise that they were making at the time, they were not absolutely certain that they heard the noise. What was certain was the fact that everyone felt the vibration. As the sitting continued, other raps also continued to happen. The raps also increased in volume until they were heard by everyone. Yet the members were startled by actual paranormal phenomena, even though this was the goal of these meetings. They apparently didn't expect that they were personally capable of creating paranormal results, even though they understood at an intellectual level that results were possible. This is not only an example of holding two conflicting beliefs, but also a demonstration that the subconscious belief that causes results rather than the beliefs of the conscious mind. The SORRAT experiments were similar in that they also seemed to have no physical action that directly caused the phenomena to begin. What does this tell us? That whatever mechanism that allows our minds to influence the material world in this way is happening like a spontaneous breakthrough. There was no request for a spirit to give this result, so I would also conclude that this spontaneous breakthrough was probably not caused by an external influence. The first paranormal sounds here also started out very quiet before they grew in intensity. The table also started to move slightly, and the center of the table was unnaturally cold. Both the SORRAT and the Philip experiments described the raps as vibrations that came from inside the object in question. Dr. Nyhart, who led the SORRAT experiments, said that the vibrations were almost molecular or submolecular, as though the components of the wood fibers are straining against each other. I've explained in my Mechanics of the Paranormal videos that it appears to be that the paranormal influence happens at the quantum level. The coldness that is associated with this paranormal phenomena in the SORRAT experiments seemed to be inconsistent. It did not always happen. which leads me to believe that it is a side effect of the underlying mechanism. Many scientists have tried to study people who have telekinetic abilities in the hope that we can find out more about how it works. In this case, the person had eczema that became irritated when he used his abilities to move an object. He would also complain that there was a sensation of static electricity building up over his arm. To relieve this, he would put his hand in water and sometimes experience an electric shock when he did this. There is a great disparity in the specific telekinesis mechanism with this person when compared to the Philip group, for example. We don't have any really good answers as to why this would be the case. We could speculate that the underlying mechanism that allows the mind to affect matter has some sort of inherent feature that allows for different ways to achieve the same goal. It's also important to explain the likely reasons that the SORRAT group took a significant amount of time to achieve results. The Philip group, in comparison, did not take that long to get results when they realized that meditation was not really productive. The first reason that inhibited the SORRAT group was an early attempt to get the members to will the table to rise. However, this approach tended to weaken group support instead of strengthening it. Because of this, it was decided that it was better to let paranormal phenomena just happen instead of trying to force it. As a side note, the book about the SORRAT group defines telekinesis as a controlled mental influence over matter, as opposed to what they define as psychokinesis, which is uncontrolled paranormal effects. Until I read this book, I have never heard anyone use these definitions. Most people, like myself, use psychokinesis and telekinesis to describe any mind over matter influence, whether directly controlled or not. Next, the SORRAT group started out from the beginning with significant scrutiny and investigated every questionable sound or movement in order to determine if there was a natural explanation. Kenneth Batcheldor has pointed out that psychic events are difficult to confirm when compared to other phenomena. His theory was that by attempting to verify first with significant scientific scrutiny, we are inadvertently causing unconducive or adverse conditions before the phenomena gets a chance to truly flourish. He suggested that we try what he calls a gambling method, in which we don't provide scrutiny right away and bet on the idea that what is happening is likely paranormal, so that we can get a chance to progress and learn more about it that way. Batcheldor states that in his experiments, every increment of control had a negative effect on the phenomena, and that if they had continued like that, any progress made would be enormously slow. He also says that a critical or questioning mindset in the members of the group may also inhibit the phenomena. The evidence suggests that Batcheldor is correct. In the Philip group, some of the members had encountered significant skepticism from friends. This contributed to a negative attitude that was unconsciously destroying Philip and making the raps weaker. So they concluded that positive and expectant thought was absolutely necessary to keep this phenomena alive. Nina Kulagina, mentioned here by her maiden name, has the ability to produce psychokinesis by herself relatively reliably. It is an interesting fact that when she is surrounded by friendly people, psychokinesis can happen easily within a matter of minutes, but when there are unpleasant people watching with significant scrutiny, it can take several hours to perform the same task. This fact has a lot of implications, and it helps to explain why rapport between multiple people makes it easier for telekinesis to happen in the first place. People who want a specific paranormal phenomena to happen seem to have an accumulative effect, even if we don't understand exactly why or how this is the case. Those who hold New Age beliefs would likely refer to this effect as energy. Energy is often ambiguous and used in imprecise ways by New Agers. The precision of terminology that we use reflects the precision of the understanding that we have about the phenomena. Negative energy is no more precise or descriptive than the even more antiquated term of negative fluids. You can't harness the negative energy of a skeptic any more than you can pour out their negative fluids. In both cases, the terminology fails to convey the adequate understanding of a concept, and such words only serve as placeholders. It is better to call what happens between multiple people in this context of psychokinesis to be a cumulative paranormal influence. A cumulative paranormal influence also affects objects as well. In the case of Sean McNamara, he has found that objects that he has spent a considerable amount of time practicing on can automatically respond to him entering the room by the object turning towards him. I've also heard of some people who have found a similar affinity with Ouija boards. The planchette likes to point at these kind of people. In the case of Pavel Stepanek, it was noticed that Pavel became attuned to specific cards and specific envelopes. For whatever reason, certain cards were guessed more easily than others. Likewise, certain envelopes allowed the item inside to be guessed more easily. Going back to the SORRAT group, touching their hands together around the table while it was vibrating paranormally put them into a pleasant state of rapport with each other. I believe this sensation was a result of the accumulative paranormal influence. Touching the table itself was pleasant in a physical way, but also in the sense that they had succeeded in reaching out and touching a mysterious force. Throughout the SORRAT experiments, there was a consistent theme that it was hard to distinguish with absolute certainty who or what this force ultimately was. From my perspective, it's abundantly clear that the group itself was responsible for the force. I mean this in the sense that it was because of them that the objects could move. If there was no group, there would be no means for subconscious manifestations or human spirits that could communicate with the group. In a manner of speaking, the group allowed such manifestations and spirits to use their force to move tables and make knocks. William Roll used an EEG machine to measure the brain waves of various SORRAT members while psychokinesis was actively happening. The author says that they didn't find any significant change in brain waves that would correspond to the psychokinesis, and essentially he concludes that the paranormal force that they were witnessing seems to not originate in the human mind. John Gerald Taylor also measured the brainwaves of children who were able to bend metal with paranormal forces, and he found no abnormalities that would correlate to psychokinesis. Since we understand that the children were unquestionably the cause of the metal bending, we can thoroughly debunk the assumption that using paranormal forces must result in some change in brainwaves. We can also say that this means an ordinary state of mind is also capable of causing psychokinesis. People started developing paranormal abilities after watching Uri Geller on television. This sharing or teaching of abilities should be called subconscious skill transfer. I don't believe that there is any other term for it, so that is what I'll call it for now. A doctor by the name of William Wolfson found that metal bent even if it was placed next to a piece of paper that had the names of various PK psychics written on it. Likewise, metal bending occurred during videotaped, not live footage of Uri Geller. It is because of these sort of observations that leads us to the conclusion that Uri's feats can act as some sort of psychological key to unlocking previously undiscovered abilities. Also, sometimes poltergeist activity would start to happen once children started to bend metal. Like I mentioned before, a skeptical and uneasy atmosphere would reduce the strength and frequency of their abilities. The contagious aspect of telekinesis is very interesting. In the case of Joseph Gallenberger, he was suspicious if bending metal was truly telekinesis or just merely sleight of hand. This was until someone who was really good at bending metal simply put his hand behind Joseph's heart, and the fork that Joseph was holding just softened. A similar effect can be seen in the use of dowsing or divining rods. For those of you who are not familiar, dowsing rods are held loosely in the hands, and they move when someone gets close to an object that they want to find. This is typically done to find lost items or the right place to drill a well. So when someone who is a practiced dowser touches the hand of a novice who can't dowse, the novice gains the ability and the dowsing rod starts to move in his hands. Likewise, a strong skeptic who touches a dowser will extinguish the ability and the dowsing rod will stop moving. If the ability to dowse or bend metal can be taught to a novice with a simple touch, then it's very clear that the skill operates at a subconscious or at a paranormal level because there is no conscious lesson being taught. Likewise, the ability to have paranormal wrappings give intelligent answers to questions can also be shared, as demonstrated in the case of the Fox sisters. Those who had heard about the Fox sisters' communication with an unknown wrapping force found that there was also wrapping that started in their own homes. Julian Isaacs actually devised a screening method to find people that could bend metal paranormally based on the principle of suggestion. This group was given a lecture with the covert intent to convince them of the reality of metal bending. In this way, some of the people accept the suggestion that it is possible and then develop the paranormal ability. Some people are more susceptible to learning paranormal abilities spontaneously than others. This is represented in the amount of people who can learn metal bending, for example. John Taylor notes that a high percentage of people who have metal bending powers, many of them are children. He openly wonders about why this would be the case. If he had simply considered his own observation about the open-mindedness of children and their willingness to readily believe what they see, he would have answered his own question. Also, the higher mental capacity that comes with a more mature mind is not actually an inherent advantage in the ability to bend metal. Some of the people who had strong metal bending powers were severely mentally retarded. It seems almost certain that there is an element of suggestion that can lead people to obtain such abilities. Bachelor talks about 2 different times in which a person faked a paranormal event and this led to paranormal results. This would begin to explain the sharing effect, as people who are more suggestible normally wouldn't have the idea planted in them that metal bending could occur in their lives. It takes something out of the ordinary, like watching Geller perform on TV, to trigger such latent abilities. I should make the point that the Philip group was able to ask Philip questions and receive answers essentially right after the raps began. In comparison, the raps of the SORRAT group started off as spontaneous and erratic, so there was no serious attempt to communicate with the force making the raps right away. As time progressed, the raps got to the point where they would begin to answer the questions, and in the text that I'm showing you now, the force moved the table when asked. The difference between the Philip and the SORRAT groups in this aspect is likely due to the fact that Philip was basically a person in his own right that had been given a sense of self. The SORRAT group had not given their force an identity, and it was simply acting on random subconscious thoughts. Thus, it had started out with spontaneous and random behavior like poltergeist cases tend to be. What is interesting in the Philip group was that the table itself moved unexpectedly at most times and were completely at random. However, the raps were never random and did not come when they were not expected. They sometimes beat along with the song, and they always came when there was a specific expectation and intent from the group.